Beowulf Retold, Part 1. The Night the Hall Trembled. Across the far whale road, a dragon-backed wave shouldered the moon, and oars beat like a giant's heart. Tonight, a name would arrive, and the earth would remember. Sea mist wrote pale letters along the keel. Stars leaned close like listeners above a hearth. Somewhere beyond that rim of black water, a hall of men waited for its own breath to return. Long before our calendars learned to count, kings wore iron on their arms, and wolves kept counsel in the pines. There stood a hall, bright as dawn, warm as bread, where harp-strings leapt and cups chimed like tame lightning. Yet joy had an enemy. When the last laugh thinned, something from the wet mist came walking, hungry for the warmth of human light. The hall had been raised to stitch quarrels into cloth. Oak pillars shouldered the roof like giants at peace. The king set benches long as winter night so rival hands could learn the shape of sharing. But envy is a door you can open just by looking at it. On a rain-sharp night, timbers learned a new language, the hard grammar of claws. After that, songs wore armor, benches overturned, shields fell like leaves. Silence sat at the high table and drank as if it had paid. Night after night, the hall learned a cruel lullaby. Men began to sleep in byres and boat sheds, away from the golden room. Torches were left burning like lonely sentries. Even laughter, when it came, kept one hand on its knife. Word travels, on gulls, on traders, on cold wind. The rumor found a young lord whose hands were notched by old battles, whose smile made fear look small. He listened, measured the dark, then went to fetch a ship. He had the kind of courage that does not shout to be believed. His name was Beowulf, and his people wore pride like a steady fire. Not bright, not loud, but hard to put out. He chose companions who laughed with their scars, men who kept oaths as easily as breath. The longship waited, a sea wolf with ribs of ash and a hunger for distance. They shoved from shore. The keel bit surf. The oars remembered their song. Day fell behind them like a burned page. Ahead, cliff fires would one day wink, as if the coast wore a crown of embers. Salt burned their lips, the wind tasted of iron. Sea spray stitched their cloaks with cold pearls. Beowulf watched the line where sea becomes land, where fate comes walking with a human face. They spoke quietly of small things, a good harvest, a lost dog, a sister's wedding that wrapped a war in ribbons. Courage, like bread, is best taken with such crumbs. Night dropped its anchor. A squall shouldered the sails. Ropes sang in pain. Water leapt the gunwales like a thief with 10 fingers, but the oars did not forget their oath. Pull, said the drum in men's chests. Pull, said the old rhythm of wood and salt. The ship rose, it fell, it rose, and then the sea remembered mercy. At dawn, a stag stood on a skerry, knee-deep in glittering foam. It turned its antlers toward them like a blessing carved from winter. The men grinned without knowing why. Beowulf nodded as to an elder. Gulls began to speak the language of land. Smoke thinned the sky where people were. Beneath the keel, the water lost its dark and learned the color of promises kept. At last, the ship shouldered onto shingle. Spears glimmered on the cliff. A coast warden stepped from the wind, measuring strangers with the old arithmetic of danger and honor. Names were weighed, oaths set like keystones. The way opened. Yet before the path unbarred, he asked for proof that was not made of breath. He wanted the shape of purpose he could touch, and the shape of restraint he could trust. Beowulf answered with open hands. He spoke of friendship across water, of a hall that deserved its light, of the quiet that should belong to sleep. He asked nothing he would not pay for. Spears lowered. The sea lost some of its voice. The warden walked before them, his cloak a small, proud flag for a kingdom that still believed in dawn. By twilight they stood before it, pillars of oak blackened with smoke, a roof like an upturned ship, carved beasts gripping the gables. From within rolled laughter, harp strings, the golden clink of cups. Yet beneath the merriment drifted another sound, a door that does not wish to close. Inside, the light hit like summer. Men rose, hands clasped forearms. A seat at the board was given. The aged king, ring-giver, wolf of winters, welcomed the sea-wolves with bread and meat, and joy for a while remembered itself. A cup went sunwise around the benches. Names were sewn to faces with smiles. The steward poured mead like a patient river, and the harpist braided courage into sound. Yet on the posts hung trophies not of hunt, but of absence. Dented shields, ragged banners, an empty helm lined with candlelight. Every song here contained a pause, a place where memory looked down. A courtier with a tongue like whetted iron rose to weigh the guest. Doubt is a kind of loyalty when it bends towards safety. He asked whether the Sea Lord's fame was full weight or only bright paint. Beowulf did not fan the fire. He set his words like stones across water, few, flat, steady. Deeds, he said without heat, would argue for themselves by morning. The king laid a weathered hand on Beowulf's shoulder, a quiet decree that ended the test. The doubter sat. The hall breathed. The harpist found the thread again. An old man spoke of the hall's first winter, of hungry years turned aside by feasts, of wolves that learned to skirt the light. The young listened with the respectful impatience of men who will soon have their own stories. Beowulf rose. He did not boast. He measured his fear and set it by the door. Let the night come. He would meet it with empty hands. If the dark hated iron, let it find his grip. Some frowned at that. A brave folly, they thought, the pride of youth wearing a crown it had not yet earned. Others understood that faith sometimes chooses the weapon least likely to be mistaken for luck. A wind moved along the rafters as if a river had been lifted into the air. Torches leaned and then remembered themselves. Outside, the marsh rehearsed its old wet prayer. The fire settled. Tongues of light lay down like tired dogs. Guards took their posts like commas in a sentence too important to rush. Inside, men slept the way trees sleep in wind, bending, but rooted. A cup rolled, settled, rolled again. Somewhere a door latch remembered a different night and trembled. Breath by breath, the hall came to believe in rest. It began as a smell, cold stone, wet bark, old coins. Then a shadow taller than the king's tallest oath crossed the threshold, as if the knight had decided to walk upright. It reached a bench. Fingers like roots closed on a man and plucked him from his dream. Another followed. Life lifted the way a child lifts a toy. Warmth spilled onto the floor. A wakeful gaze answered. Beowulf's eyes were winter stars. There was no steel by his promise. There was a wrist, ending in a world of dark. He reached, and the knight learned the name of grip. The hall woke roaring. Benches skated, posts shuddered, shields leapt from walls as if eager to help. The creature thrashed, its breath a graveyard gale, finding at last not prey, but purpose against it. Beowulf set his feet like anchors. He let the monster pull, then answered with a hunger older than fear, the hunger to be equal to the hour that asks your name. Beams cried out, sparks ran like frightened mice. Men stumbled toward courage, found it, and held the room like a circle of stones around a storm. The thing's hide was night forged into hide again. Its nails wrote grief on oak. It learned, slowly, that a man's hands could be iron if they had sworn properly. Grip tightened. Bone spoke a brittle word. The thing tore free, paying its price in a rain of dark. It fled the light in a storm of pain, leaving a map that any hunter could read. Silence stood, breathing hard. Then the hall found its voice, not laughter, not yet, but the sound men make when the night has been asked to leave by the front door. They looked at Beowulf as men look at dawn's first-level light, not as a miracle, as a relief the world had meant to give all along. He said little. He set the dark trophy where morning would have to speak to it. He rinsed his hands as if washing off a story that wasn't his to keep. The king's gaze held years, and something gentler than years. He did not thank the hero with gold, not yet. He thanked him with a hand on the shoulder, which sometimes weighs more. Fires were fed, doors were barred in the human way, though everyone knew such bars were only songs we sing to our own nerves. The night withdrew a little. The benches remembered their use. Yet deep in the mire, where reeds whisper and black water keeps counsel, grief was waking. The marsh does not lose without asking back. The night had a kin, and kin remember. Across bent sedge and torn peat, a road of darker dark led into the country of water. The prints were not prints but wounds. The ground would take time to forget them. Beowulf slept at last, not from weariness, but from choice. Morning would require a steadier hand than midnight. The hall kept watch with him by not breaking. Far off, something old drew breath under a roof of roots. The pool that does not reflect rehearsed the shape of an answer. Next time, Beowulf Retold, Part 2, The Mother of the Mire. Victory has an echo, and the echo has claws.